Welcome to episode 14 of the Customers Who Click podcast. Today we're talking about brand strategy with Friday O'Flaherty. In this episode you'll learn about branding, brand strategy and why it's important both internally and externally for a business. It helps determine the direction of a business and it outlines its values and how it wants to be perceived externally. So let's hear from Friday and learn about branding. Hi Friday, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you on. Can you tell us a bit about yourself? What do you do? Why do you do it?
Thanks, Will. Great to be here. I'm the founder of a creative agency called Running with Scissors. We actually originally launched in Auckland, New Zealand in 2008 and opened a London office in 2013. We started in kind of full service advertising, and as I guess the marketplace has changed, the advertising marketplace has changed to become more digital. We've changed with it, and our specialty kind of sits mostly within the digital and social media landscape these days. We take advantage of the time zone difference. So we've got an opposing time zone between the UK and New Zealand. So we work pretty much 24 hours without anyone working overtime. That's one of the key propositions of the agency. For me personally, I'm a creative strategist. I guess my passion sits in kind of the crossings between brand, creative ideas, and performance marketing. I'm a massive fan of imagination in business and really believe in, I guess, what creativity can do for companies to help them succeed. And that's, I guess, also beyond not just an advertising idea, but also just in terms of creative thinking and how you can use creativity as a problem-solving tool.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So can you tell us a bit about, what a normal day looks like for you?
Yeah, sure. So I guess we work across quite a few different types of brands. So we work with some quite big ones, and we also work with startups. And at the moment, we're working with brands like Yazoo, Pedigree, Whiskers, Crave, Yale Locks. We've got a healthcare startup working with a local cafe to kind of help them out, and Carpenter as well as a company called Food Nation, which is a plant-based food company. I guess the day-to-day is pretty diverse because a lot of it depends on what sort of phase of a program we're in. So we kind of work through with any bit of client work. We work through sort of a clarity stage to make sure that we understand the insights of the market and set a good strategy for that particular client. Creativity, coming up with good ideas, the delivery of that idea, including for digital media buying, and then making sure we're constantly learning and analysing and adapting as we go. And I guess one of the things that's changed a lot over the years for advertising agencies is it's become a lot more iterative. It used to be that you could set a campaign up and get it running and leave it kind of going for 5 years. Now things change a lot quicker and a lot faster. So you kind of have to go through cycles a lot quicker to get back to the start point to see if the clarity that you had at the beginning of a project is still there a second time around.
Yeah, if you're exposed to the same advertisement, even if there's 10, 15 different kind of formats and versions of it, if it's the same message every time, it probably starts to lose its impact, doesn't it?
It's a balance as well, because there's also the benefit of repetition. I think we tend to get sick of the content that we create before audiences do, because you are involved in it for such a long time before it even makes it into the market. But I think there's things are just moving really fast and changing all the time, but we also have so much data now to go through and use and learn from. So we know so much more than we used to. We can be a lot quicker in terms of how we adapt, and we can share a lot more things that are, I guess, more relevant to our consumers.
Yeah. So before we kind of get into the detail, I guess, can you tell us a bit just kind of generally about branding, like what and why you think a brand strategy is important?
Yeah, of course. So I guess brand strategy is really about understanding, I guess, why a business exists, what's its reason for being, what role does it play in a consumer's life. It also helps set a direction for where the business wants to go, what does it want to become, what does it stand for? What's its values? How does it behave? How does it want to be perceived? It's kind of, I mean, the main foundation, I guess, for a business in terms of, its place in the world and its role for its audience, for the people that it's serving.
What are the first things you do when starting with a new client or a new project around branding?
Yeah, I guess it does depend a lot whether it's a new client in terms of a startup or it's a new client in terms of an established brand. And a lot of that depends on how much information or how much history the company already has. But I guess the things that we're looking at is what's doing a comms audit to look at what the messages have been within the market. Interviewing internally is really useful to understand. When you've got a company that's got founders still involved, it's really interesting to get the origin story. But even if it's not, it's really interesting to talk to different people within the business to understand their perspective of the business and why it exists, and I guess also what their role is within it. Looking at competitor landscape so you can understand where that particular business or that particular brand sits in the market, and consumer research so you can understand how the brand's perceived, where are the weaknesses from a consumer perspective and where are its strengths, and so you can then build a brand strategy to take the brand into its next phase, into its next stage of growth.
Yeah, I suppose it's obviously really important to make sure that the way the consumer perceives the brand is similar or the same as the way the founders do and the staff do. If there's gaps there, it means the messaging's not going to be working, is it? Or not as effective.
That's exactly right. And I think one of the misconceptions, or some of the areas where I think branding is maybe misunderstood, is the internal and external positioning of a company. Because if they're not connected, if they're not joined in some way, the messaging that you're sharing with the consumer just won't resonate, because the behaviors that they see or the customer service that they get doesn't connect. So I think it's like branding isn't really a marketing piece in some ways. It's about a company vision and a way that the business should be behaving internally and externally. So I think that's why things need to connect, and also why we need to, when we look at branding, we need to make sure it's understood by everyone throughout the business, not just a marketing team.
Yeah, well, I think that leads us quite nicely onto what are the sort of common myths and misconceptions about branding. And I think I see, a lot of the time, branding is kind of a brand book with a set of guidelines on colours, fonts, and a little bit of tone of voice, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I guess one of the areas that people get confused about, there's identity guidelines, which are your logo and your colours, typefaces and all that sort of stuff. And then there's which do form a part of the brand guide. So they are obviously an important part of the brand, because it's the visual aspect of it. And the logo is the signature for the brand. But it's not a brand strategy, it's just a part of it. And so the brand really needs to be something that people understand in terms of where the brand is going and how they behave. And it also, I think people overcomplicate it sometimes and try maybe even get a bit too poetic. Like, you can look at some brand guidelines and you go, that's really lovely, like it's a beautiful piece of prose, but what does it even mean? What am I supposed to do with this information? If people can't read a brand book, as an example, and understand it, then it's kind of pointless.
Yeah, I think I've definitely received a few, proposals kind of from agencies on what a brand would look like and stuff, and it's kind of just full of buzzwords, and you read through it, and at the time when you're reading each slide, you're thinking, okay, yeah, this is quite cool, this sounds really good, and then you finish it off, and you're like, so what does that actually mean? Like, what? So one thing I've always found with these sort of documents that come across from, whether it's from branding teams or agencies, whatever, It's like, what is the practical use of this? Because you'll get, the colors, tone of voice and stuff. Even the tone of voice can be a bit, but I always kind of end up going, well, how do we actually use this?
Yeah, and I think it's a very valid point, and I think like things like tone of voice guides are really good if you're a copywriter, but they're not really necessarily that helpful to other parts of business or other suppliers. I think I keep going back to when NASA put people on the moon, and there's that story about, I can't even remember who the example was, but someone's walking through and there's someone cleaning the floor, and they get asked, what are you doing? And they say, oh, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. It's like understanding why, what the business is all about, and being really clear about it. And that's space travel is pretty exciting, but it should still be the same. It's really simple. It's not a mode of language, but it's really clear. It's really easy to understand, and you kind of know what you're supposed to be doing. And that's where I think a really great brand strategy can really join people together and create some combined momentum around a common goal.
Yeah, sometimes people in the business will know what that business does and who its audience is and stuff, but there's not much of that why. What are we like? Why are we doing this?
Yeah,
what's the end goal? It's not someone wants to. I don't know. I'm thinking back through the places I've worked at, but people don't want to read a magazine or hire a car for the day. There's a reason they want to do that. But a lot of the messaging internally and how that information is used is kind of just to push that just the usage rather than what people want to get out of it. So are there some kind of big or common mistakes you see in brand strategies? Do you get maybe new clients come in, or speaking of prospects who maybe just have got it a bit wrong, and you kind of work with them to set out a real strategy?
I think actually, to be honest, it's probably a lot of the stuff that we might have just covered. I think it's, for us, like one of the things that we're looking for is, do we understand it? Like, can we read it, or is it shared with us in a different way that we actually know where the brand is going, and also where are the areas for improvement? If you get some good consumer research and it tells you that, like, you think your brand is about being fast and effective, that's kind of a benefit that you thought everyone understood, and then you get consumer research and that doesn't even register, that you realize that actually your the delivery of the brand hasn't been the communication to the delivery against your brand strategy hasn't been right. So then you can start finding areas to improve.
Yeah, it's again that situation where people in the business, because I guess you're close to it, you're working on it every single day, so you know exactly what the business does, and because you know that so well, I guess there's kind of that assumption that if you put out some of this messaging and these advertisements and things and get people to the website, they will fully understand what you do as well. I think it's like you were saying with how you're working on creative and stuff, like all day, every day, and so you're really, really close to it, and you get fed up with it before the consumer. I think it's that same kind of, if you're exposed to the brand all day, every day, you almost like take it for granted that people would understand it because it's second nature to you.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right. I think I guess the important point in terms of brand, and because you'll start off and you'll set a strategy, but it's not finished. That's just the starting point, and then you have to obviously deliver it. But then you also just have to constantly listen, because if the consumer are the ones that you're trying to connect with, and your internal staff and audience are also the ones that are helping you deliver it. So you need to be listening internally and externally to make sure that the strategy is delivering its objectives, and that the people are perceiving the brand in the way that you want it to be, and that your products and services are actually delivering. And consumers are pretty quick to tell you when you've gone off track, or if you're not delivering against the promise that you've set. There's lots to, I guess, constantly review. It's not because I guess that's the other thing actually with a brand book. It feels like one of those things that can just sit on a desk or sit in a folder and never gets referred to again. And it really needs to be something that you're living all the time. And putting values on a wall does seem a bit cliche, but I think if it's important and if it's something that you really want everyone to believe in, then frame them up and put them on the wall. It's why hide them? Why keep them as a secret, or just something that you refer to once a year when you're doing your brand check-in?
Yeah, I think if they're proper brand values that everyone in the company is frequently made aware of, and I was one place I worked at, bonuses were partly affected by how well you kind of performed against the brand values. It was more of an opinion thing, but it was they used that as a way of saying, make sure you are doing these things, and managers on a kind of quarterly basis would kind of check in with people and see how they're doing with those and see where they can, maybe make some improvements. And I think in those cases, it's great to have it up on the wall, make sure people can see these, make sure people are reminded. But if you're not that, like say, if your brand book just kind of goes in a drawer somewhere, I think in those cases it tends to be maybe a lot of startups as well. I think they're probably guilty of that, where people just put posters up on the walls or like framed images of kind of motivational quotes and things, which they kind of claim are there. These are our brand values, and no one particularly cares. I made an interesting point about how consumers will often tell you when you're kind of veering away from your brand values. I suppose for brand values that makes sense, but in other cases, do you find a lot of the time, or not a lot of the time, but do you find times where how we were talking about the messaging is missing part of the consumer perception of what your brand does or offers, but are there times when actually it's not the case that it's missing, it's the case that people see it in a completely different way, and actually instead of trying to teach them what you think your brand is about, you actually adapt the brand to what they're saying?
Sort of, but actually, I really want to go back to another point you made just earlier about the incentivizing the right outcomes, because I think that's such a important point to discuss. And I think part of it is like having, like you say, you can do bonuses that are based on a certain type of behavior. One of the stories I remember, which sticks in my mind, is Rob Fife, who was the CEO of Air New Zealand. He used to always try and find the stories from staff that typified the behavior that he was hoping to see in terms of the customer service that they were offering. And he really wanted to make it feel like you were getting New Zealand hospitality on these, on the national carrier. And so he would find these stories of different, and they could either come from a consumer or they could come from somewhere internally. And then he would really highlight them. So that would be his biggest point, was here's this person, this flight attendant that did this thing, and she'd share it with the whole company. And that would be like held up as, an example. And also this person would be celebrated for that behavior. It wasn't even financial. It was just like the head of the company recognizing that someone had behaved in a way that was very particular to what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I think it's always really important when, the people at the top, especially with these big businesses, where they might not even ever meet that staff member. But yeah, they're looking for that feedback. They find that little story or whatever, and then they kind of highlight it to the company. I think it's quite, it's uplifting. It's motivational for the team. It makes people want to behave in those ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really motivating, isn't it? If you're an employee, and especially in a big company, you're an employee, and the head of the company calls you out in front of everyone for something you've done really well. It's pretty motivating and exciting to get that kind of feedback.
Yeah, especially when if you have never worked directly with them, with that person, they might not have really even been aware of you, but to kind of call you out like that, I think it's really good for company morale, and helps people kind of work towards those brand values. It's quite different to when you have been working with that person and they're happy with the work you've done with them, and they just go, oh yeah, this person's doing a great job. It's kind of like that's good to hear. It's good feedback, but it's just a little different when that person is actively spending their time looking out for these good examples to highlight.
Yeah, and being very specific about the examples that they're sharing. So it's not just like, oh, you did a good job on that flight and everyone, seemed to be happy. It was that extra bit, the bit that made a difference. It made it unique,
Yeah, exactly. So if someone was maybe in the process of starting a business, or I guess possibly even just they want to review their branding, what suggestions would you give them? Where should they start?
I guess if it's a startup and they're just beginning, I guess it's being really clear about their why. So why are they doing it? Why do they exist? Why would a consumer care? I think from a positioning point of view, especially if you're going into a market where there's lots of players already, then you really need to be quite bold and simple in terms of what you're trying to say, how you position yourself. And from a design perspective, I think it's good to be very consistent in the early stages. I mean, you should be pretty consistent all the time, but especially when you start out, you probably don't have the same sort of budget that a big company has, so you've got to try and make sure that every time you're sharing, people start to remember it. I guess regardless, keep learning from your consumers and your team, and also don't expect to please everyone. I think, if you're taking a brand positioning and you believe in it, then there are going to be people that don't think it's right, and that's fine. But if you can get enough people excited about it in the direction you're heading, then that's all you really want.
Yeah, I think if you get the brand values and things in place, and you can get a team excited, then you can, hopefully do well with almost any business. I think you mentioned you work with, was it Yale locks?
Yep.
Yeah, which, as a consumer, you might not think is the most exciting brand, but they've been around for God knows how many years. Quite a long time, I think.
Yeah, it's an awfully long time.
And it's, at the end of the day, it's a lock, isn't it? But they've positioned themselves as one of the best, one of the most secure. And as long as you're reinforcing that all the time, it works for you. It's going to work for you in the long run, isn't it? Whereas if you're not too consistent with your messaging and your brand, I imagine I don't know their brand very well, but I imagine they went very much down the route of, this is a lock. It's going to keep your doors or whatever locked, so you don't have to worry about things. Whereas other brands might just have a bit, that weak or inconsistent messaging, which makes people go, I've kind of heard of this brand because I've seen some ads or heard their name, but I wouldn't really be able to tell you what they do, why they do it. So I think, consistency and kind of that's, like you said, you don't have to please everyone, do you? So that almost single focus. I know a lot of people on LinkedIn who talk about, when you're positioning yourselves, really, really, really like granularly target people. So come up with like that one problem that you're trying to fix, and find the people who need that solution. And then you can start to maybe branch out a little bit later.
I think it's definitely about being very clear, because I also think people, we're bombarded now with so many messages and so many things that if it's not clear, then you've really got no chance. I read a stat the other day. It's something like on Facebook, people are spending actually was on Instagram, as people are spending like 1.7 seconds per piece of content. So if you think about that as how much time you've got to land a message, it's not very much time. I mean, granted, that's the average. It's not like that's what people are doing for every single thing, but you really need to try and, but if you're new, you need to interrupt them and break into their minds.
Yeah, but I mean, if the average is 1.7 seconds, it means some of them are going to be a fraction of a second.
Yeah,
quite a significant number will be under a second, which is not really enough time to take in anything.
No.
Unless you're one of those brands that is really well known, and so people don't need to stick on it for long. For example, if Apple popped up on my Instagram feed with an ad, I would probably skip over it, but I would still notice an Apple ad. Whereas other brands, if I don't know them, they're going to have to grab my attention with that ad. I was trying to, as you were talking, I was trying to think through some examples of ads that I see that have actually grabbed my attention. There's one that pops up every now and again for I'm not sure if it's an actual journal or whether it's like a journal case. But the only thing I can remember, I can't remember what they're called, anything like that. The only thing I remember is the ad is all about getting 50% off.
Right.
And it's, for me, that message really clashes with the rest of their messaging, which is around how it's, premium, I think it's like premium handmade leather or something from Italy or something like that. But then they focus so much on this 50% off. And I'm like, well, if it is that great, why do you need to be pushing that message?
Well, I think that's the other thing, is understanding where you sit within the market. If you're a luxury brand, do you really want to be doing massive discounts? And does that make sense to a consumer? Because price is another factor in a consumer's mind when they're trying to assess whether the brand is a high quality or not. So they're almost saying we're a luxury product, but it's actually not worth what we think it's worth. So buy it if you want.
There's I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a chair company who do, I think they actually position it as gaming chairs. So kind of, they're almost like sports car seats, I think.
Yep.
But they are a desk chair. And I'd heard of them. I stumbled across them the other day, but I'd heard of them before. I've heard of them a few times. I've heard people mention them on social media, saying these are the best desk chairs. Absolutely recommend it. And they are about £400. I think they start at about £400. So, when you get those recommendations and then you see the price, you kind of think, all right, this must be good. And so you start checking details and stuff. Whereas, if all these people are raving about it and I went on to it and saw that it was like £99 or whatever, I might think, how much better can that be than some of the pretty rubbish chairs on Amazon and stuff?
Yeah, it definitely has an impact. But I guess also because you're already slightly familiar with it and you'd seen good reviews of it, it kind of, the price then I guess backs up the premium nature of it. Whereas potentially maybe if you'd have seen the price the first time, you might have written it off as just being a very expensive chair. But it was justified. The decision was justified because that it performs to the way that it says it's supposed to. People have bought it and been happy.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think branding and brand strategy is going to change or change or develop over the next 12 to 18 months? I guess particularly with everything that's been happening this year.
Yeah, big year for everyone, isn't it? I guess there's a couple of things that are pretty fascinating in terms of change. There's the speed of the, I guess, the growth into e-commerce and digital marketing. I mean, it's been growing all the time, and it's at a pretty good clip. But I feel like we've just all of a sudden jumped forward. I think someone said it's a bit like we're now in what we were expecting in 2030. We've kind of taken a 10-year leap forward in terms of online what's been bought online and what's been bought through mobile and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like that's gonna continue. I also think there's like the power of small, I think, is going to carry on. Like I really like that it's pretty easy now to start a business and to be able to sell online pretty quickly. Like, Instagram and Facebook launching shop. I think it makes it pretty easy for like little players to now be able to achieve some of the things that was only really there for the bigger players with a bigger, digital team. And I guess the other area that's interesting at the moment, in particular with the Black Lives Matter stuff, is around purpose and I guess sincerity as well. I think there's a few brands that have kind of been called out a little bit, like almost there's a bit of tokenism and a little bit of treating it like a trend, I guess, in some ways, and going all these other brands are doing something around Black Lives Matter, so we better say something as well and talk about how diverse our company is. But it's such a big mistake if your company isn't actually that diverse or isn't behaving in a way that's actually even closely to being appropriate. So I think the purpose stuff and sincerity stuff is the stuff that's probably the most interesting from a brand perspective.
Yeah, I think especially with Black Lives Matter, it's been a much more difficult one. I think a lot of brands have been a lot more careful in saying anything about it, and it has led to some interesting moments. I don't know if you saw. I think it was Yorkshire Tea was the one that got attacked on social media. They were criticised because they commented on it, I think, and this person said, had a bit of a go, and then said, I won't be drinking Yorkshire Tea anymore. I think it was, I'll be going to PG Tips, and then PG Tips responded saying, we were just taking our time saying anything because it's obviously a very sensitive thing, but of course we support it, so you can go buy a tea somewhere else. And I think it was really, it was just interesting that, obviously they hadn't said anything because they were they even said, we were trying to work out what our communication or whatever on this should be. And other companies that have just said, just post things about it. But I think the one that probably didn't go so well for a lot of brands was around coronavirus, when everyone started getting all these emails from the CEO of pretty much every company you've ever even just visited the website of, saying, we know these difficult times, blah, 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 blah. And it was like the most meaningless message. Well, the thing is that I don't think there's a reason to just say anything about it.
Yeah, I thought there were some brands that did some really amazing stuff around COVID. I think there were the brands that did just simple things in terms of what the steps they were taking to make consumers or shoppers safe. Like Tesco did their Little Helps video, which I thought was really, really nice in terms of the steps they were taking, like really early on. These are the steps that we're taking so you can still come to the supermarket and shop and still be safe. Like when they were introducing social distancing and they put their screens up and all, only a certain number of people inside and all that sort of stuff. I thought, though, that was quite a good, like it had a purpose. They did it because they wanted to keep their staff safe and they wanted to keep the shoppers safe, and it was an important message to share so that people understood how shopping had changed. And there were a few other like really nice examples of brands doing quite cool stuff. Like Coke gave their social media, basically handed over their social media feeds to experts so that experts could share stuff around the COVID, like the virus, and like actually communicate with, I guess, the people that follow Coke and be an authority in an area that Coke had no knowledge of, but they also probably weren't really a time where they wanted to be selling a whole lot of, well, I'm sure they wanted to be selling Coke, but they weren't trying to push it in a traditional advertising sense. They were just actually being a utility to people.
But these are examples of brands which they've had a reason to do it. Tesco, they had a purpose for the communication. Coke did a really good thing. But it's all those other brands which basically just sent out almost the same email. each,
Yeah.
just with this statement from the CEO.
Yeah.
And I think,
yeah, I agree. Totally pointless.
That was probably, I think, for a lot of brands, probably a bit more damaging than actually, valuable and useful for them. Not that, obviously it's not enough. It wasn't offensive, but lots of people were probably thinking, what is the point? You're just filling the inbox.
Yeah, and I think that's where some companies get it right and some companies get it wrong, and they felt like they needed to say something, but they didn't really have anything useful to say, so it just comes out kind of bad. I think there is more room these days to make mistakes as long as you're also prepared to fix them. I mean, I think sending out emails that no one wants to read is one of those things where you just probably find that your database just keeps getting smaller and smaller. But where brands go out and they do something and they have, maybe it's been misinterpreted or maybe they just haven't really thought about it. I think there's a bit more room for them to fix it and get it right, as long as they do it quickly and do it sincerely. And I think that in some ways can almost create I don't know, more respect for the brand in the eyes of consumers.
Yeah, definitely, especially when if brands pull an advertising campaign or whatever because of backlash, and actually say, really sorry, we got this wrong. This is what we're going to do to sort it or whatever. Admitting that mistake really, really does build trust. And I think there are probably some examples of brands who have quite badly messed up, but almost come out of the situation better because they've actually just apologized and said, we really, really messed up with that. We're sorry. Do you have any pet peeves when it comes to marketing, just generally, either as a marketer yourself or as a consumer?
Yeah, there's a few things about marketing that kind of bug me. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of hyperbole. I think there are this is probably a criticism of agencies that work in the marketing world in terms of over talking about themselves, hyping themselves up maybe a bit too much, and even hyping up the role of marketing sometimes I think is like it's one of the things that we've got. It's not the be all and end all, and I just think sometimes people get a bit carried away with it. Jargon's another thing that bugs me. It's fine if you know what it is, but actually if you're trying to share brand with lots of different people, then you really got to get all the jargon out and just talk in plain language. And I guess the other thing that's kind of funny, we find we're very open and like we really enjoy collaborating with like clients and other agencies. I think one of the things that always bugs me with creativity is when anyone claims an idea as their own, or that they've been the only one that possibly made it happen. That's probably more of an advertising agency gripe than anything else. Yeah,
because obviously it's come from somewhere. It's always come from somewhere, hasn't it? It's always another advert they've seen or a campaign that has triggered this little idea, but they position it as this is brand new, this is mine.
Yeah. It's also it's a team game. Like we, running with scissors, we don't exist without our clients. We have, we work with our clients to deliver work for them. We're a service business, and we can't say that the stuff that we created is just because we created it. We've got to work with our clients to make anything happen. So I feel like there's probably not enough praise for clients when really great ideas or great creative comes into the marketplace.
Yeah, it's got to start with them, hasn't it? And then there's also customer feedback, customer research. It tends to be like the people who come up with these ideas are more, I guess, the people who are quite good at digging into that data and the information and building something out of it.
I also don't want to take anything away from the people that have found those incredible insights and created some amazing campaigns. But it's also acknowledging that even if there's one genius in the room, it's still there's still a lot of people that have to work together to make something happen. It's a bit like football, I guess. You can maybe you've got Messi in your team, but you can't do it all on their own. They still need another 10 players.
Yeah, definitely. So if you could kill off one particular marketing channel or tactic, what would it be?
Maybe it's more like a change than a kill, but I'm really hating pre-rolls at the moment. But I feel like I'm stuck on I'm just getting the same content over and over again. I think if I see another Squarespace advertisement, I'll throw my computer through the window. I'm a big fan of a frequency cap on your advertising, so that it's people aren't seeing the same ad 3 times in 3 minutes. So I think that's probably my current pet hate. Maybe I'm just spending too much time on YouTube, and maybe I should upgrade to the premium account.
Yeah, no, pre-rolls get quite annoying, don't they? Especially when they actually just play automatically, even when you're not on a video specific site. So you can be on a news site, for example, and the video will just start playing, and it will normally play an ad first. I find that quite annoying.
I think like the Google Display stuff too is, you're reading an article, and especially an article that's got a lot of images in it, and then there's ads that are sitting within it. I don't think we've quite nailed that as a like separating the ads from the articles. Sometimes it feels like the pictures are part of the article, and then you realise that the ad's got nothing to do with the article at all, and it's like it's either just getting missed or it's just annoying and interrupting the flow of the article. So yeah, actually I've noticed that recently a couple of times going through an article, and there's been an ad. The article's been talking about some statistics or something. It's normally about football, to be honest. It's normally what I'm reading. But the ad will look like it's showing a graph or something. And so I'm sat there going, I don't understand how that's relevant. And then suddenly, well, obviously not that long, but after a second, I suddenly realise it's an ad for, a newspaper or something, something like that. And then you skip past, and it's just a bit. It's interrupting, but not in a good or useful way. Obviously when you're in your Instagram feed or Facebook feed, and the ads interrupt you because they're just a piece of content that appears next, that's a little different because each piece of content is broken up. But when it disrupts you in the middle of something you're reading, that's pretty frustrating. Yeah, and I think sometimes it almost feels like they're trying to trick you into clicking on an ad that you don't even want to look at, which is it's either just annoying or it's it takes too much. Not that it takes that much time, but it feels like it's disrupting your flow because it's distracting you from what you're really wanting to do.
Yeah, actually, app ads which you accidentally click and they open up the App Store. That's particularly frustrating.
Yeah. I hear you on that one for sure.
There should be like an extra confirm for that. Do you want to open the App Store or something like that? If you've clicked the ad deliberately, then you go yes, sure. And if you haven't clicked it, you can avoid that annoying distraction.
No, I agree with you.
Cool. Well, it's been really good stuff. Really a pleasure talking to you. How can people get in touch if they want to know more or find out more about branding?
So I guess email's probably your best bet. Friday@rws.agency. So that's probably the best way. I mean, you can always check out our website. It's also rws.agency. So runningwithscissors.agency.
Cool. Well, great stuff, Friday. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it. Great talking to you, Will.
You too. It's really important to understand the real why of the business and understand the competitor landscape, run customer research to understand what the perception of the brand is, and also where there are gaps in the market in terms of brand values. The way the consumer perceives the brand is so important, and that's affected by your advertising, your customer service, and the actions you take during times of crisis or big social movements. It's not so much an area of marketing, but more of a company vision and a way the business should be behaving both internally and externally, which is why it's so important the whole company buys into the brand and its values. If you'd like to learn more about branding, reach out to Friday on LinkedIn or drop an email to will@customerswhoclick.com. In the next episode, I've got David Fraser from Ready 10 with me to talk about PR. But until then, keep those customers clicking.